A young man pays the bill of an old man thrown out of a restaurant. The next day he is surprised by men in suits. The bustling diner on the corner of Maple and Oak was a staple of Millbrook, a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was here on a crisp autumn morning that 12-year-old Ethan Hayes found himself standing in line, clutching the $10 bill his parents had given him for lunch. The smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, making his stomach growl in anticipation. As Ethan waited patiently for his turn to order, his attention was drawn to a commotion near the front of the line. An elderly man, his weathered hands shaking slightly, was fumbling with his wallet. A look of distress etched across his face. "I'm sorry, sir, but if you can't pay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the cashier said, her voice tinged with a mix of sympathy and frustration. The old man's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I thought I had enough. I must have miscalculated. I'm so sorry." Without hesitation, Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'd like to pay for this gentleman's meal, please." The cashier blinked in surprise, while the old man turned to Ethan with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Young man, you don't have to do that," he protested weakly. Ethan smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "It's okay, sir. I want to." As Ethan handed over his $10 bill, he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. He looked up to see a middle-aged man standing behind him, his eyes twinkling with admiration. "That was a very kind thing you did," the man said softly. "I'm Dr. Robert Thornton, and that gentleman you just helped is my grandfather, Harold." Ethan's cheeks reddened at the praise. "I'm Ethan," he replied shyly. "It's nice to meet you both." As they moved to the side to allow the line to continue, Harold grasped Ethan's hand in both of his own. "Thank you, Ethan. You've restored this old man's faith in humanity today." Little did Ethan know that this simple act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Thornton and Harold became frequent visitors to the diner, always keeping an eye out for the kind-hearted boy who had touched their lives. They learned that Ethan was a bright student with a passion for science, and that his parents, Sarah and Michael Hayes, were hard-working individuals who had instilled in their son a deep sense of empathy and compassion. As autumn turned to winter, a friendship began to blossom between the Thorntons and the Hayes family. Dr. Thornton, impressed by Ethan's curiosity and intelligence, took the boy under his wing, sharing stories of his experiences as a doctor and nurturing Ethan's growing interest in medicine. For Ethan, Dr. Thornton became more than just a friend. He became a mentor and a source of inspiration. The boy's eyes would light up with excitement whenever the doctor spoke about his work, and he began to dream of one day following in Dr. Thornton's footsteps. As the years passed, Ethan's bond with the Thorntons grew stronger. Harold, who had once felt isolated and alone, now found himself surrounded by the warmth of an adopted family. He delighted in watching Ethan grow from a compassionate boy into a determined young man, his heart swelling with pride at the thought that he had played a small part in shaping Ethan's journey. Dr. Thornton, too, found himself profoundly changed by his relationship with Ethan and the Hayes family. The cynicism that had begun to creep into his professional life melted away in the face of Ethan's enthusiasm and genuine desire to help others. He rediscovered the joy and purpose that had first led him to become a doctor, and his passion for his work was rekindled. As Ethan entered his final year of high school, his dream of becoming a doctor burned brighter than ever. With Dr. Thornton's guidance and the unwavering support of his parents and Harold, Ethan threw himself into his studies, determined to make his dream a reality. Little did any of them know that their lives were about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test the strength of their bonds and the depth of their love for one another. The seed of compassion that Ethan had planted years ago in that small diner was about to blossom into something far greater than any of them could have imagined. The years flew by like pages torn from a calendar, each one bringing new challenges and triumphs for Ethan and his extended family. As he walked across the stage to receive his high school diploma, Ethan's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. In the audience, his parents beamed with joy, while Dr. Thornton and Harold, now affectionately known as Grandpa Harold, cheered louder than anyone else. That summer was a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Ethan had been accepted to the prestigious Millbrook University School of Medicine, following in Dr. Thornton's footsteps. As he packed his bags for the dormitory, each item carefully chosen and lovingly placed, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this point. "I never imagined that buying a stranger's meal would lead to all of this," Ethan mused to his mother as she helped him fold his clothes. Sarah Hayes smiled, her eyes misty with emotion. "That's the thing about kindness, sweetheart. It has a way of coming back to you in ways you never expect." The night before Ethan was due to leave for university, the Hayes family hosted a small gathering. Dr. Thornton and Grandpa Harold were there, of course, along with a few close friends. As they sat around the backyard, sharing stories and laughter under the warm glow of string lights, Ethan felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. Dr. Thornton raised his glass in a toast. "To Ethan," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "a young man who reminds us all of the power of a single act of kindness. May your journey through medical school be filled with as much compassion and determination as you've shown us these past 6 years." As the night wore on, Grandpa Harold pulled Ethan aside. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a small wrapped package into Ethan's hands. "Open it when you're settled in your dorm room. It's just a little reminder of where this all began." The next morning, amid tearful goodbyes and promises to call often, Ethan set off for his new life. As he unpacked in his dorm room, his roommate yet to arrive, he remembered Grandpa Harold's gift. With trembling fingers, he unwrapped the package to find a framed photograph of the diner where they had first met, along with the $10 bill Ethan had used to pay for Harold's meal all those years ago. Attached was a note that read, "Never forget the ripple effect of kindness. You've changed more lives than you know. Love, Grandpa Harold." Ethan's eyes welled with tears as he placed the frame on his desk, a constant reminder of the journey that had brought him here and the family that would always support him. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan threw himself into his studies with characteristic enthusiasm. The rigors of medical school were challenging, but he found himself thriving under the pressure. His natural empathy and genuine desire to help others made him stand out among his peers, and he quickly became a favorite among his professors. Dr. Thornton, true to his word, remained a constant source of support and guidance. Their weekly phone calls became a lifeline for Ethan, a chance to share his triumphs and seek advice on the challenges he faced. More than once, Ethan found himself grateful for the unique perspective his mentor could offer, bridging the gap between textbook knowledge and real-world experience. Back home, Sarah and Michael Hayes adjusted to life as empty nesters, finding comfort in their deepening friendship with the Thorntons. They often spent evenings with Harold, swapping stories about Ethan's childhood and marveling at the young man he was becoming. As Ethan's first year of medical school drew to a close, he found himself looking forward to a summer internship at Millbrook General Hospital, where Dr. Thornton worked. It was an opportunity he had dreamed of, a chance to gain hands-on experience and work alongside the man who had inspired his journey into medicine. The night before his internship was set to begin, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind raced with excitement and nervousness, imagining all the ways he could prove himself worthy of Dr. Thornton's mentorship. As he tossed and turned, his phone buzzed with a text message. "Remember, Doctor," Thornton had written, "medicine is about more than just knowledge. It's about connecting with people, understanding their stories, and treating the person, not just the disease. You've had that gift since you were 12 years old. Trust in it." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He was ready for this next chapter, ready to continue the ripple effect of kindness that had started in that small diner years ago. Little did he know that the universe had other plans, and that the true test of his compassion and resilience was just around the corner. The ripples of his kindness were about to become waves, crashing against the shores of fate and forever altering the landscape of his life and the lives of those he held dear. The summer internship at Millbrook General Hospital flew by in a blur of long shifts, coffee-fueled study sessions, and moments of pure exhilaration as Ethan got his first real taste of life as a doctor. Working alongside Dr. Thornton, he felt more certain than ever that he had chosen the right path. As August drew to a close and Ethan prepared to return to medical school for his second year, there was a palpable sense of excitement in the air. He had excelled in his internship, earning glowing recommendations from Dr. Thornton and the other attending physicians. More importantly, he had connected with patients in a way that left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. The night before he was due to leave, Ethan decided to take a drive to clear his head and reflect on the summer's experiences. The warm evening air rushed through the open windows of his car as he cruised along the winding country roads outside of Millbrook. His mind was so full of thoughts and plans for the future that he almost missed the sharp turn ahead. In a split second, everything changed. The screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal, and then darkness. When Dr. Thornton's phone rang in the middle of the night, he knew instinctively that something was terribly wrong. The voice on the other end, a colleague from the emergency room, confirmed his worst fears. Ethan had been in a serious car accident and was being rushed into surgery. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Dr. Thornton raced to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear and worry. He called Sarah and Michael, who arrived pale-faced and trembling, clinging to each other for support. Grandpa Harold insisted on coming too, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a grim determination. As they waited for news, the gravity of the situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. This makeshift family, brought together by a single act of kindness years ago, now faced its greatest challenge yet. Hours ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the surgeon emerged, his face etched with exhaustion. "We've done all we can," he said softly. "The next 48 hours will be critical. He's in a coma, and I'm sorry, but we just don't know if he'll wake up." The words hit them like a physical blow. Sarah collapsed into Michael's arms, her body racked with sobs. Dr. Thornton stood frozen, his medical training warring with his emotional connection to Ethan. It was Grandpa Harold who spoke first, his voice trembling but resolute. "He's a fighter, that boy," he said, reaching out to squeeze Sarah's hand. "He's got too much kindness left to give to this world. He'll come back to us, we just have to believe." In the days that followed, Ethan's hospital room became a second home to his family and friends. They took turns sitting with him, talking to him, reading his favorite books aloud. Dr. Thornton, unable to bear the thought of leaving Ethan's care to anyone else, took a leave of absence from work to oversee his treatment personally. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the toll of Ethan's condition began to wear on everyone. Sarah and Michael struggled to balance their vigil at the hospital with the demands of work and daily life. Dr. Thornton threw himself into researching every possible treatment option, often working late into the night, poring over medical journals and consulting with specialists around the world. Grandpa Harold became a pillar of strength for the group, his unwavering faith in Ethan's recovery a beacon of hope in their darkest moments. He spent hours by Ethan's bedside, regaling him with stories of their shared past and plans for the future. "Remember that diner, Ethan?" he would say, his voice cracking with emotion. "You've got to wake up so we can go back there. I still owe you a meal, you know." As autumn faded into winter, and the world outside Ethan's hospital room continued to turn, those who loved him remained steadfast in their belief that he would return to them. They celebrated his birthday in the ICU, bringing in a small cupcake with a single candle that Sarah blew out on his behalf, wishing with all her heart for her son to open his eyes. It was Dr. Thornton who first noticed the subtle changes. A twitch of Ethan's fingers, a slight increase in his brain activity. Hardly daring to hope, he intensified his efforts, working tirelessly to bring Ethan back to consciousness. And then, on a cold January morning, as Sarah sat holding her son's hand and softly humming a lullaby from his childhood, Ethan's eyes fluttered open. The room erupted in a chaos of joy and disbelief. Nurses rushed in, alerted by the sudden change in Ethan's vital signs. Dr. Thornton, who had been catching a few hours of sleep in the on-call room, sprinted down the hallway, his heart pounding with a mixture of professional concern and personal elation. As Ethan slowly regained consciousness, blinking in confusion at the faces surrounding him, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. He was back. Their prayers had been answered. But as the initial euphoria began to fade, a new reality set in. Ethan had been in a coma for nearly 6 months, The road to recovery would be long and challenging, and there was one person noticeably absent from the celebration, Ethan's girlfriend, Megan, who had been a constant presence in the early days of his hospitalization, but had gradually stopped visiting as the weeks dragged on. As Ethan began the arduous process of rehabilitation, learning to speak and move again, he also had to confront the painful truth that life had moved on without him. Megan, unable to cope with the uncertainty of his condition, had ended their relationship and moved away. The news hit Ethan hard, adding an emotional hurdle to his already daunting physical recovery. But as he struggled with feelings of abandonment and loss, he found strength in the unwavering support of his unconventional family. Dr. Thornton, seeing Ethan's pain, redoubled his efforts to aid in his recovery, pushing him to regain his strength and mobility. Sarah and Michael surrounded their son with love, reminding him daily of his worth and the bright future that still lay ahead. And Grandpa Harold, with his gentle wisdom and unshakable optimism, became Ethan's confidant, listening patiently as the young man poured out his fears and frustrations. As winter melted into spring, Ethan made remarkable progress. His determination, coupled with the dedication of his support system, allowed him to surpass even the most optimistic projections for his recovery. But even as his body healed, the emotional scars of his ordeal lingered. It was Dr. Thornton who suggested that Ethan might benefit from some time away, a chance to heal not just physically, but emotionally as well. "There's a rehabilitation center in Colorado," he explained one afternoon as they sat in the hospital garden. "They specialize in helping people who've been through traumatic experiences. I think it could be good for you, Ethan." Ethan hesitated, the thought of leaving his family and the safety of Millbrook filling him with anxiety. But as he looked into Dr. Thornton's eyes, he saw not just the concern of a doctor, but the love of a man who had become like a second father to him. "You think I'm ready?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Doctor." Thornton squeezed his shoulder gently. "I think you're stronger than you know, Ethan. This could be a chance for you to rediscover yourself, to heal in ways that go beyond the physical." After much discussion with his parents and Grandpa Harold, Ethan made the difficult decision to go to Colorado. The day of his departure was bittersweet, filled with tears and tight hugs, but also hope for what the future might hold. "Remember," Grandpa Harold said as he embraced Ethan one last time, "you carry our love with you wherever you go, and that diner will be waiting for us when you get back." The Rocky Mountain Rehabilitation Center stood nestled among towering pines, its modern architecture blending seamlessly with the rugged landscape. As Ethan stepped out of the taxi, breathing in the crisp mountain air, he felt a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The first few days were a whirlwind of assessments, introductions, and adjusting to a new routine. Ethan found himself surrounded by others who, like him, were on journeys of recovery and self-discovery. There was Jake, a former soldier learning to live with PTSD, Maria, rebuilding her life after a stroke, and countless others, each with their own story of resilience. But it was during his first session with Dr. Amelia Chen, the center's lead therapist, that Ethan began to truly open up. Dr. Chen, with her gentle demeanor and piercing insight, had a way of making Ethan feel both challenged and supported. "Tell me, Ethan," she said during one of their early sessions, "what do you see when you look in the mirror now?" Ethan paused, caught off guard by the directness of the question. I'm not sure," he admitted. "Sometimes I still see the person I was before the accident. Other times I feel like a stranger to myself." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "That's not uncommon after a traumatic experience. Part of our work together will be to help you integrate these different parts of yourself: the person you were, the person you are now, and the person you want to become." As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself opening up more, not just in therapy, but with his fellow residents. He shared stories of his family, of Dr. Thornton and Grandpa Harold, and of the fateful day in the diner that had set his life on its current path. "It's funny," he mused one evening during a group session. "I always thought that moment was about me helping someone else, but now I see how much it gave me in return." Slowly but surely, Ethan began to reconnect with himself. He rediscovered his passion for medicine through volunteering in the center's clinic, assisting the staff in small ways that reminded him of why he had chosen this path in the first place. He also found unexpected solace in art therapy. Though he had never considered himself particularly artistic, Ethan discovered that painting allowed him to express emotions he struggled to put into words. His canvases became a visual journey of his recovery, from dark, chaotic swirls in the early days to brighter, more hopeful compositions as time went on. One painting in particular stood out. It depicted a small diner, bathed in warm golden light, with shadowy figures that hinted at the connections formed there. When Dr. Chen asked him about it, Ethan found himself smiling. "It's where it all began," he explained. "And somehow, I think it's where I'm heading back to in a way." As spring bloomed into summer, Ethan felt a shift within himself. The pain of Megan's departure, while still present, no longer overwhelmed him. Instead, he found himself focusing on the unwavering support of his family and friends back home and the new connections he had formed at the center. It was during a hike with Jake and Maria as they stood atop a ridge overlooking a vast valley that Ethan had an epiphany. "You know," he said, his eyes scanning the horizon, "I've been so focused on getting back to who I was before the accident. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe it's about becoming someone new, someone who carries the best parts of who I was, but is also shaped by everything I've been through." Jake clapped him on the shoulder. "That's deep, man, but I think you're onto something." As his time at the center drew to a close, Ethan felt a mix of emotions. He was eager to return home, to see his family and to take the next steps in his journey. But he also felt a tinge of sadness at leaving the place and people who had become such an integral part of his healing. On his last night, as he packed his bags, Ethan came across the framed photo of the diner that Grandpa Harold had given him. He ran his fingers over the glass, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'm coming home," he whispered, "and I think I'm finally ready for that meal you owe me, Grandpa." The familiar streets of Millbrook looked both unchanged and entirely new to Ethan as he gazed out the car window. His parents, who had flown out to Colorado to accompany him home, kept sneaking glances at him from the front seat, their eyes shining with a mixture of joy and concern. "You okay back there, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, reaching back to squeeze his knee. Ethan nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "Yeah, Mom. It's just a lot to take in." As they pulled into the driveway of his childhood home, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. There, on the front porch, stood Dr. Orr, Thornton and Grandpa Harold, broad grins on their faces, and a hand-painted Welcome Home banner strung up behind them. The next few moments were a blur of hugs, laughter, and a few happy tears. As Ethan embraced Grandpa Harold, he felt the old man slip something into his hand. "Thought you might want this back?" Harold whispered. Ethan looked down to see the $10 bill, the very same one he had used to buy Harold's meal all those years ago. "I think it's time we put this to use, don't you?" Harold said with a wink. And so on Ethan's first evening back in Millbrook, the unlikely family made their way to the corner diner where it had all begun. As they settled into a booth, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed, and yet how some things remained beautifully the same. Over plates of burgers and fries, Ethan shared stories from his time in Colorado, the challenges he'd faced, the friendships he'd formed, and the insights he'd gained. His family listened intently, their faces reflecting pride, empathy, and unwavering support. "So what's next?" Dr. Thornton asked as they finished their meal. "Have you given any thought to returning to medical school?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I have, and I want to go back, but..." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I think I want to specialize in rehabilitation medicine. After everything I've been through, I feel like I could really make a difference for people going through similar struggles." The table fell silent for a moment before erupting in enthusiastic support. Dr. Thornton's eyes shone with pride, and Grandpa Harold reached across the table to clasp Ethan's hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've always had a gift for helping others, Ethan. This feels like the perfect way to use it." As they left the diner that night, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still challenges to face and hurdles to overcome, but for the first time in a long time, he felt truly excited about the future. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity, Ethan worked tirelessly to catch up on the schoolwork he had missed, with Dr. Thornton providing guidance and tutoring along the way. He also began volunteering at a local rehabilitation center, gaining hands-on experience and confirming his newfound passion. It was during one of these volunteer shifts that Ethan met Claire, a physical therapist with a quick wit and a compassionate heart. As they worked together, helping patients regain strength and mobility, Ethan found himself drawn to her positive energy and dedication. Their friendship grew slowly, built on a foundation of shared experiences and mutual respect. Claire had her own story of overcoming adversity. She had lost her younger brother to a rare illness, which had inspired her career choice. As they shared their stories, Ethan felt a connection forming that was different from anything he had experienced before. One evening, as they walked through the park after a long day at the center, Claire turned to Ethan with a serious expression. "You know, when I first met you, I could see that you were carrying a lot of pain," she said softly. "But watching you with the patients, seeing how you've turned your experience into a source of strength and empathy, it's really inspiring, Ethan." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. "I couldn't have done it without the support of my family," he replied. "And people like you, who remind me why this work is so important." As they stood there, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Ethan realized that his heart was opening up again. The pain of his past wasn't gone, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it had become a part of the tapestry of his life, woven together with threads of love, resilience, and hope. With a deep breath, Ethan took Claire's hand in his. She looked up at him, a soft smile playing on her lips, and in that moment he knew that this was the start of a new chapter, one filled with possibility and promise. 5 years had passed since Ethan's return to Millbrook, and life had taken on a rhythm that felt both familiar and entirely new. He had completed his medical degree, specializing in rehabilitation medicine, and was now in the final year of his residency at Millbrook General Hospital. The journey hadn't been easy. There were long nights of study, moments of self-doubt, and the occasional setback. But through it all, Ethan had his unconventional family by his side. Dr. Thornton, now semi-retired, remained a constant source of guidance and support. Grandpa Harold, though slowed by age, never failed to lift Ethan's spirits with his unwavering optimism and terrible jokes. And then there was Claire. What had started as a friendship born of shared passion for their work had blossomed into a deep and abiding love. They had moved in together the previous year, creating a home filled with laughter, understanding, and the occasional heated debate over the best approach to patient care. It was a crisp autumn morning, much like the one when Ethan had first met Harold, when Dr. Thornton called with news that would once again shift the course of their lives. "Ethan," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and nostalgia, "I've decided it's time for me to fully retire, and I want you to take over my practice." Ethan felt a rush of emotions, honor, excitement, and a touch of anxiety. "Are you sure, Robert? That's a big responsibility. I can't think of anyone better suited for it." Dr. Thornton replied, "You've grown into an exceptional doctor, Ethan. More importantly, you've never lost sight of the compassion that set you on this path in the first place." As the reality of the offer sank in, Ethan knew he had a big decision to make. That night, he and Claire took a long walk through the town, discussing the opportunity and what it would mean for their future. "It's an amazing offer," Claire said, squeezing his hand. "And I think you'd be wonderful at it, but it's a big commitment. Are you ready for that?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I think I am. It feels right, you know, like everything has been leading to this moment." They stopped at the old diner, now under new management but still a cornerstone of the community. Through the window, Ethan could see families and friends gathered, sharing meals and creating memories. He thought about the simple act of kindness that had started it all, and how it had rippled out to touch so many lives. "You know," he said, turning to Claire with a smile, "I have an idea for how we can make this work even better." Over the next few months, Ethan and Claire threw themselves into planning. With Dr. Thornton's blessing and Grandpa Harold's enthusiastic support, they began to transform the practice into something new. a comprehensive care center that would combine traditional medical treatment with rehabilitation services and community outreach programs. The day of the center's grand opening arrived, and Ethan found himself standing before a crowd of familiar faces and new friends. His parents beamed with pride from the front row, while Dr. Thornton and Grandpa Harold sat beside them, their eyes misty with emotion. As Ethan began his speech, he felt a swell of gratitude for the journey that had brought him to this moment. Years ago, in a diner just down the street, a simple act of kindness set in motion a series of events that none of us could have predicted, he began. It taught me that compassion has the power to heal, to connect, and to transform lives in ways we can't even imagine. He went on to outline his vision for the center, a place where patients would receive not just medical care, but holistic support to help them rebuild their lives after illness or injury. A place where the spirit of that first act of kindness would be multiplied 1,000-fold. As he concluded his speech and cut the ribbon to officially open the center, Ethan felt Claire's hand slip into his. He looked out at the faces of his family, both blood and chosen, and knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their shared story. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Ethan found himself sitting in a quiet corner with Grandpa Harold. The old man's eyes twinkled as he regarded Ethan with a mixture of pride and amusement. "You know," Harold said, his voice gruff with emotion, "when you bought me that meal all those years ago, I thought I was the luckiest man in the world to have met such a kind young boy." He paused, reaching out to clasp Ethan's hand. "I had no idea how much luckier I was going to get." Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes. "I'm the lucky one, Grandpa. You, Dr. Thornton, my parents. You all saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Harold nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That's what family does, son. And make no mistake, that's what we are, family, not by blood but by choice, by love." As they sat there, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting around them, Ethan reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them all to this moment. From a chance encounter in a diner to the opening of a center that would touch countless lives, it had been a path filled with unexpected turns, moments of darkness, and ultimately, profound joy. He thought about Claire and the life they were building together, about the patients they would help, the lives they would touch, about the legacy of kindness that would continue to ripple outward, touching lives in ways they might never know. And in that moment, surrounded by the love of his unconventional family and the promise of the future stretching out before him, Ethan Hayes knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The journey hadn't always been easy, but every step had led him here, to a place of purpose, of love, and of endless possibility. As the evening drew to a close and goodbyes were said, Ethan and Claire walked hand in hand under the starlit sky. The old diner caught Ethan's eye once more, and he smiled, thinking of how a single moment within its walls had changed everything. "You know," he said to Claire, "I think it's time we treated ourselves to a late-night snack. What do you say we grab a booth and some pie?" Claire laughed, her eyes sparkling. "I thought you'd never ask." And so, as they settled into the familiar booth ordering coffee and apple pie, Ethan felt the warmth of coming full circle. He raised his mug in a silent toast, to kindness, to family, and to the beautiful unpredictability of life. The story of Ethan Hayes and his unconventional family was far from over. In fact, in many ways it felt like it was just beginning. But one thing was certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by the enduring power of compassion and the unbreakable bonds of love. As Ethan and Claire savored their late-night pie, the diner around them hummed with the quiet energy of a small town winding down for the night. Through the window, they could see the soft glow of the newly opened care center, a beacon of hope for the community. "You know," Claire said, reaching across the table to take Ethan's hand, "I've been thinking about something." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What's on your mind?" Claire took a deep breath, her eyes shining with a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Well, seeing you with all the kids at the center's opening today, it got me thinking about our future. About maybe starting a family of our own." Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. The thought had crossed his mind too. especially in recent months as they'd settled into their life together. But hearing Claire voice it made it suddenly, thrillingly real. "Really?" he asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You think we're ready for that?" Claire nodded, squeezing his hand. "I do. I mean, look at everything we've built together. And the family you've shown me. The one you've created with Dr. Thornton and Grandpa Harold. It's made me realize that family isn't just about blood. It's about love and choice and the connections we make." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. He thought about his own journey, how a simple act of kindness had led to the creation of a family that defied conventional definitions. He thought about the lessons he'd learned from Dr. Thornton about mentorship and guidance, and from Grandpa Harold about resilience and joy in the face of adversity. "I think you're right," he said softly. "I think we could create something beautiful together." As they continued to talk, their excitement growing with each passing moment, neither of them noticed the elderly couple in the booth behind them, listening with fond smiles on their faces. The next morning, as Ethan arrived at the care center for his first official day as its director, he was surprised to find Dr. Thornton waiting for him at the entrance. "Robert, what are you doing here so early?" Ethan asked, concern creeping into his voice. "Is everything okay?" Dr. Thornton chuckled, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Everything's fine, my boy. More than fine, actually. I just couldn't resist being here to see you start this new chapter." As they walked through the center together, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. From mentor and student to colleagues and family, their relationship had evolved in ways neither of them could have predicted. "You know," Dr. Thornton said as they reached Ethan's new office, "I overheard something interesting at the diner last night." Ethan froze, a blush creeping up his neck. "Oh?" Dr. Thornton's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Something about a certain young couple considering starting a family." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. Then, seeing the joy and support in his mentor's eyes, he broke into a grin. "And we were just talking about it. Nothing's decided yet, but you're thinking about it," Dr. Thornton finished for him. "Ethan, my boy, I couldn't be happier for you, and I want you to know that when the time comes, that child will have the most incredible extended family any kid could ask for." Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thank you, Robert, for everything. I don't know if I've ever really said it, but you've been like a father to me, you and Grandpa Harold both." Dr. Thornton pulled Ethan into a tight hug. "And you've been like a son to us. Now go on, you've got a center to run and lives to change." As Ethan settled into his new role, the days flew by in a whirlwind of activity. The care center quickly became a vital part of the community, offering hope and healing to those who needed it most. Ethan and Claire worked side by side, their complementary skills creating a synergy that benefited everyone who walked through their doors. Months passed, and as winter gave way to spring, Ethan and Claire found themselves standing in their living room, staring in disbelief at a small plastic stick with 2 pink lines. We're going to have a baby," Claire whispered, her voice filled with awe. Ethan pulled her into his arms, his heart soaring. "We're going to have a baby," he repeated, the words feeling simultaneously surreal and perfectly right. The news spread quickly through their tight-knit family. Sarah and Michael were overjoyed at the prospect of becoming grandparents. Dr. Thornton immediately began compiling a list of parenting books and advice, while Grandpa Harold started planning elaborate bedtime stories he would tell his future great-grandchild. As Claire's pregnancy progressed, Ethan found himself reflecting more and more on the twists and turns that had led him to this moment. He thought about the scared, broken young man he had been after his accident, and marveled at the journey that had brought him here, about to start a family of his own, running a care center that embodied the very principles of kindness and compassion that had shaped his life. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Claire turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, her hand resting on her growing belly, "I've been thinking about names for the baby." Ethan smiled, covering her hand with his own. "Oh? What did you have in mind?" Claire's eyes sparkled. "Well, if it's a boy, I was thinking Harold, and if it's a girl, maybe Roberta." Ethan felt his heart swell with emotion. The idea of honoring the 2 men who had played such pivotal roles in his life, in their lives, felt perfectly right. "I think that's beautiful," he said softly, pulling Claire close. "And I think this little one is going to have the most amazing story to grow up with." As they sat there, basking in the glow of impending parenthood and the love that surrounded them, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the power of a single act of kindness. From a $10 bill in a diner, to a family bound by love rather than blood, to a care center changing lives, and now to a new life about to enter the world. The ripples of that one moment had spread further than he could have ever imagined. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Ethan made a silent promise to his unborn child. A promise to pass on the lessons he had learned about compassion, resilience, and the transformative power of kindness. A promise to nurture the kind of love that transcends conventional boundaries and creates families out of strangers. A promise to keep the ripples of kindness flowing, touching lives for generations to come.